Hello and welcome to our webinar, Balancing Supplier Consolidation with Supplier Diversification, featuring our speaker, Joe Engel, Account Executive for the Great Lakes region. Joe is an account executive with Xcentric Mold and Engineering, providing injection molding, CNC machining, and 3D printing services to clients in the Great Lakes region of the US. Prior to joining Xcentric, Joe worked for 2 product development companies over 5 years, helping customers get their products to market. You can connect with Joe using the contact information on the screen. This presentation is expected to last approximately 45 minutes, and there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Use the questions field on your screen to ask questions during the presentation, and we will address these at the end of the webinar. We encourage you to follow Xcentric Mold and Engineering on LinkedIn so you can stay up to date on our latest blog topics and webinar schedules. I now turn over the webinar to Joe.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hear me speak about balancing supplier consolidation with supplier diversification. What I hope you take away from my presentation today is a better understanding of how analyzing your supply chain and considering a consolidation strategy may benefit your daily workload and help achieve company goals. A little bit of background on myself. My name is Joe Engel, and I'm an account executive here at Xcentric Mold and Engineering, located in Clinton Township, Michigan. I have been working with manufacturing companies for the past 8 years in various capacities. Some of my experience includes deploying vendor-managed inventory systems and processes to OEMs, along with working for manufacturing companies both in traditional manufacturing of plastics and metals, as well as rapid prototyping and low-volume production services. I understand the complexities of a supply chain and where there can be potential for improvements to be made. I'm excited to talk about this topic today because perhaps in 2020 more than ever, supply chains have been a key focal point for companies. Now, COVID has changed our everyday personal lives and for many companies, the way they conduct business. Back in March, while some companies shut down for a few days, weeks, or even months, some didn't shut down at all and went about business as usual. There was a huge disruption in production, logistics, product development, and many other facets of everyday business life, such as the way we communicate and interact with one another. While some companies realized they may have relied on only a few suppliers too heavily and had too many eggs in one basket, so to speak, others may have used this downtime to reevaluate their supply chain and strategy. And with that, Mark, I'd like to kick off our first poll question. Today, I would like to talk about our presentation overview. So I'll be talking about the advantages of consolidating your supply chain from many vendors to just a few, considerations for a consolidation strategy, advantages of supply chain diversification, considerations for a diversification strategy, balancing consolidation and diversification, and how Xcentric can help with that balance. So we give people another 10 to 15 seconds for this poll here.
All right, Joe, it looks like everybody has voted or entered their information. So I'm going to close that and I will share our results.
Okay, so it looks like a good mix of cross departments. Definitely, I hope, talking about balancing supply consolidation and supply diversification could be a benefit to any role in any department, specifically for, procurement and engineering. And with that, I'd like to talk about some of the advantages of supply chain consolidation. There are many advantages of supply chain consolidation, and I will talk briefly about a few of them. A single point of contact can be a good way to build stronger relationships. By working with fewer suppliers, this means less relationships to manage and may lead to getting to know a few contacts better to establish partnerships rather than just being another name on a supplier list. This could also mean less processes and procedures to know for quoting and submitting a purchase order. So for example, company A might require quotes to be submitted through a portal system. Company B may require 2D drawings, via email, and company C might require CAD files and 2D drawings, but only through their website's generic sales email box. So reducing the number of companies and processes to remember can oftentimes make the job more efficient and less stressful. Often viewed as a hidden or soft cost is the actual cost of taking the time to create requests for quotes or purchase orders. This can mean someone in purchasing or engineering is taking the time to separate parts by category, like C parts such as fasteners or MRO and consumables, by material like plastics, metals, rubbers, or perhaps they separate their suppliers by manufacturing processes like injection molding, machining, stamping, grinding, laser cutting, sheet metal, or even die casting. So this process can take up time and be tedious to sort through, especially for purchasing departments who may be dealing with hundreds or thousands of part numbers, files, and prints. The next one I'd like to talk about is lower administration costs. These costs are often overlooked when companies set cost savings goals for their team to try and achieve. So some common tactics include asking vendors for price breaks based on quantities purchased, rebate programs based on annual spend, negotiating terms, or flat out asking for a cost reduction to improve the bottom line. The average cost to create a purchase order in 2020 can range from $50 to $200 based on industry. In manufacturing specifically, my research has found the average cost right now is about $100 for placing a PO. So how do these costs actually break down? Well, first we have what we call internal PO processing. So this is using a software system to actually create the PO requisition, data entry such as part number, vendor code, quantity, price, and ship date. Then we have external order processing. So this would be any interactions with the supplier. This can include clarifying any technical questions, adjusting prices, quantities, revising prints or CAD data, or any communication on delivery dates. And then you have the actual task of managing the open orders. So this is the cost and time for confirming ship dates, modifying lines on the order, or any other communication related to the status of the open order. Now, certainly technology can play a huge role in this and be a big benefit if some of the open order status checks can be done through automation or supplier portal programs. Another piece of the cost is order receiving. So upon receiving the order, shipping and receiving needs to check the inventory to confirm the parts have the right physical count and that this matches the packing slip, and at a minimum, check cosmetic quality to ensure there's no damage to the box or products inside. So the last piece of going into that $100 I was talking about for soft costs would be the invoice processing. So this is the finance team. They process the invoice for payment by checking the invoice against the purchase order and shipping documents to make sure there are no discrepancies of the data. So with less suppliers, a company may benefit with soft cost savings and efficiency across multiple departments. Processing less purchase orders saves time and money in a variety of ways. Less data entry, less emails being sent out, less time spent on the phone chasing down ship dates or clarifying order acknowledgements, and less invoices for the finance team to pay out to many companies. Increased quality and speed in delivery is an interesting point to think about. So while this may not be a distinct advantage for every company or every industry, it certainly can apply it to a few. There are some small to medium-sized companies who might completely rely on their supply chain to do 100% of the quality checks or inspections of their parts. They may have a very small quality department or may not have one at all. Having a few key suppliers with trusted quality standards and procedures can certainly be of high importance to a supply chain. Choosing these trusted vendors can lead to less reject parts, failures in the field, and less complaints from end customers that could cause a huge risk to the company brand and growth, especially in consumer products. We all know with social media and customer reviews that some brands for consumer products can definitely be under attack if they have any issues in the field. So maybe you've always chose the cheapest part supplier, but the lead times are the longest. While on paper this may look like the best option, this could potentially have some negative impacts on your business. One thing to consider is now assembly or production of your final product takes longer to go to market. This could potentially take away from capturing market share or delay new product launches to get ahead of your competition. The next one I'd like to talk about is controlling ad hoc spending. So this can have a positive impact on your bottom line and will keep spending within budget. So we all know how easy it is or convenient to Google a part number, product or service that you're in need of, call up that company, get a quick quote, and order quickly on a credit card. While that certainly helps in fire drills in some scenarios, overall it might not be a good long-term strategy. It creates more suppliers for you to manage. You're probably not getting top-tier pricing as your spend is actually spread out across many suppliers rather than having it consolidated into a few suppliers that you're building good relationships with. Reducing logistics costs can be a huge savings both in time and from a fiscal perspective. With shipments from less places, it can mean less tracking numbers to monitor, less packing slips to process and analyze, as well as negotiating power with your logistics providers. And last but not least, I'd like to talk about, having higher spend with fewer suppliers. It might give you some leverage and some buying power. So it's not always true, but in many cases, a company that consolidates their spend into less suppliers, meaning those suppliers get a higher amount of the spend, results in some buying leverage. Many of you probably heard of Pareto's principle, otherwise known as the 80-20 rule, whereas 80% of the results will come from 20% of the action. So often in sales, it's said that 80% of the total revenue generated will come from just 20% of the customer base. On the other side of that coin, some procurement teams have found that 80% of their spend with 20% of their supply chain has given them the best service levels, delivery times, and better pricing to form great partnerships. Mark, I'd like to kick off our second poll question, please.
All right, Joe, it looks like we're about 50% of everybody has voted, so we'll just give it another moment or two. All right, it looks like we're done, so I'm going to close that and I'll share the results.
So it looks like it's pretty mixed. Definitely, we've heard from a lot of our industry partners and customers that they have seen in their supply chain, more disruption, obviously due to COVID and some of the supply chain issues across the world. But it looks like it's pretty mixed, but no one has seen less. So that is certainly something we'd expect to see. So now I'd like to talk about how the steps to actually take to effectively consolidate your supply chain. Before any tactical steps are taken to try and consolidate a supply chain, goals have to be clearly identified and targets need to be written down. So a great place to start to form these goals is to evaluate any current challenges you may have. So some questions to consider. Where are my biggest pain points or areas for improvement? Are there any upticks or trend lines in part rejections, late deliveries, or other quality issues such as defects, missing paperwork, or wrong quantity ships? Is your company missing out on potential market share because your competition is always weeks or months ahead in a new product launch? Maybe speed to market is an area of focus and leads to procurement teams focusing on reducing component lead times, which leads to quicker assembly and faster final product shipments to your market. Overall spend is usually at the top of the list for senior management, as it will directly impact the bottom line for profits for a company. But be sure to consider all costs when adding or subtracting vendors from your supply chain. So for example, consider some of the extra cost associated with the purchase order rather than the piece price. The steps I just mentioned in my previous slide of all the different soft cost touch points throughout the internal processing. Perhaps on a quote you receive that piece part that may be slightly cheaper with the lead time exactly the same to the current vendor you're supplying it from. How far away is the newly quoted vendor from your location? Will the difference in freight cost exceed the perceived cost savings? Or maybe the current vendor can manufacture this part, but now it still requires a secondary process or two. This requires multiple touch points and more handling, and now even though the newly quoted vendor has a higher piece price, they can do one or both of the secondary processes, and it actually results in overall cost reduction when you consider time, logistics, and number of steps in the process being reduced. Number two, I'd like to talk a little bit about improving supply chain visibility. Supply data visibility seems to keep getting better and better all the time with new software programs that can slice and dice information a million ways. Taking the time to analyze your data in a meaningful way is an extremely important step for effective consolidation efforts. Is there a system in place to track and analyze vendor performance for things such as on-time delivery, quality issues, communications and feedback, or quote turnaround times? Data such as number of purchase orders placed weekly, monthly, annually for a particular part or group of parts to a particular vendor. Partnering with suppliers who can quickly scale from prototyping runs to low volume or high volume production can have some big advantages for a supply chain. Having a supplier that can work quickly through small iterations in product design can speed up testing and part verification, which will overall be a win to get product to market quicker than your competitors. So there's always the question, the chicken or the egg, right? There's always that question when a new product hits the market and is ready to be launched, what is the demand going to be? Companies do not want to order too much and then be stuck with a product that does not take off like expected. Also, they do not want to have a product take off and launch and have no inventory to offer their customers. And this could, as I mentioned before, lead to negative impacts to their brand and cause some frustration among the customers. So when you're moving towards new supplier launch, keep that in mind to find someone who can have a good balance, so you're not strapped with a lot of inventory, but also they're going to be ready to take on that project if and when sales do take off. Number 4, preparing for an action plan to transform to a more digital ecosystem. So how is a digital ecosystem actually defined? One definition I found from a source called The Keen Folks is the dynamic integration of internal departments, suppliers, tools, systems, customers, and external partners brought together to increase data flow throughout the organization and drive business performance. Keen Folks research says that 87% of shoppers begin their buyer's journey through digital channels, and 98% of Americans switch between multiple devices each day. The obvious big name for online shopping in our consumer lives is Amazon. So what's interesting is we're actually seeing a shift in how procurement teams want to have a similar experience in getting information and making purchasing decisions based on the ease of being able to send and receive information that same way. So this might include information like specifications, pricing and availability, CAD files, or different drawings like that. For this to be successful, information needs to be shared on a cross-functional platform so departments are not working in silos. Maybe your company is still working out of multiple operating systems and they're not fully integrated from an IT perspective, which can make reporting and workflow difficult at times. From an external standpoint, how easy is it to access information from your suppliers and likewise for them to access information from you? Is there a shared resource place to ease the exchange of information accurately and quickly? Number 5, organizing your parts into categories. So for parts, maybe it's by material type, overall spend, number of secondary processes. Some companies have internal databases with searchable criteria fields to help narrow down their search for a particular part they need to source. So an example of this would be, let's say I'm looking for a supplier that does injection molding. They're based in the US and they have typical lead times, for 7 to 8 weeks. Certainly with customizable searchable fields for your buyers and engineering folks, it can definitely help them save time and money in their search, and especially when you guys have people that are set up in your system for easy searches like that. Now I'd like to talk about some of the advantages of supply chain diversification. Many manufacturers have been trying to reduce their reliance on China as the fragility of their supply chain networks have been exposed, initially due to tariffs, factory lockdowns, or logistics disruptions, and in 2020 by the COVID-19 pandemic. But even if your entire supply chain is already based in the United States, a diversification strategy can still provide lasting benefits to your business. Beyond the obvious benefits of improved resilience to disruptions, diversifying your supply chain helps you innovate. Expanding your network of subject matter experts outside of your usual channels will give you access to different ideas, different experiences, and perhaps a little out of the box thinking, which could help you add product features or enter new markets by leveraging their expertise, knowledge, and abilities to advance in your products and solutions. Often, a diversification strategy can lead to partnerships with smaller companies who provide the advantage of being able to adapt more quickly to market changes and business fluctuations. If your diversification strategy incorporates a corporate goal to increase diversity in your supply base, working with minority and women-owned suppliers can also open up opportunities in growing minority markets. A recent report from Michigan State University stated that diverse suppliers can be a cornerstone of any organization's success, helping companies to ethically and efficiently source products and services while maintaining profits, growing their customer base, improving the economy, and encouraging innovation. With forward-thinking supply chain management and a focus on strategic sourcing, companies and the diverse suppliers within their supply chains can increasingly benefit from going into business together. Many think that supplier consolidation is the only way to drive cost savings, for the reason I mentioned on a few of my previous slides. However, according to research, working with diverse suppliers can help you cut your cost by a third. A study by the Hackett Group found that, on average, supplier diversity programs add $3.6 million to the bottom line for every $1 million spent in procurement operation cost. It's not always true that the largest suppliers can offer the best cost efficiencies either, with many subject matter experts being able to bring a lot more to the table because of their specialism in a particular product or area. So how do you actually effectively diversify your supply chain? Executing the diversification program does not have to be an all or nothing proposition. First, determine your goals for undertaking a diversification program. Are you trying to protect against sole sourcing risks, tariffs, increasing labor costs, increasing lead times, a regional disruption caused by a natural disaster, a global disruption caused by a pandemic or political turmoil? The answer to these questions will help guide you towards a pool of suppliers to evaluate. Consider using an incremental approach. So trying to do too much at once can be overwhelming and make it easy to get discouraged by your efforts. It's often far costlier and more time consuming to apply this strategy to existing programs. Instead, consider it for new programs. Subject matter experts from new suppliers can help you innovate when you get them involved early in a new program. When evaluating new suppliers, be sure to examine their subject matter expertise and their willingness to lend it to their customers. Their experience and knowledge can be invaluable in fueling innovation for your new products. Do they offer educational research materials such as videos, white papers, case studies that can help your team design better parts for your products? Mark, I'd like to launch our next poll question, please.
All right, we're almost halfway there. All right. So it looks to me like everybody has voted. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results.
So it seems like a good portion does not have a goal. Definitely, it's something I would encourage every company and to think about for the reasons I just mentioned of, getting into new markets and really leveraging those resources from your supplier partnerships. So point number 4, consider suppliers whose own diversity, minority owned, women owned, LGBTQ owned, can support your company's goals to improve your corporate diversity. At the same time, these suppliers can improve your competitiveness in the changing market demographics. And lastly, look for suppliers who provide flexibility and agility to adapt very quickly to changing market demands. Often these suppliers are smaller, more nimble, and are able to support fluctuating demands in the market. Also look for suppliers who can offer multiple services instead of just adding a singular value. And Mark, with that, can you please launch our next poll question?
About half of our respondents have completed. All right, looks like everybody has voted. I'm going to close the poll. We'll share the results.
So it seems like a majority have at least considered both supplier consolidation and diversification. As I mentioned, a lot of companies had some downtime earlier in 2020 this spring. So definitely it was a critical time to start digging into this topic and, at least begin thinking about a strategy. And now I'd like to talk about balancing both consolidation and diversification. Strategies of consolidation and diversification are not necessarily opposing strategies. They can coexist. It is possible to reduce the total number of suppliers while also diversifying your supply base. Before deciding on how to proceed, determine your goals. Once you agree upon the objective, the strategies can be put in place. Avoid analysis paralysis. Instead of tackling all programs and tens of or hundreds of potential new suppliers, begin to focus on new product programs and evaluate maybe 3 to 4 new suppliers at a time. Be sure to remove legacy bias from your evaluation process. Define a set of evaluation criteria which will benefit your business. Then evaluate both your new supplier options and your legacy suppliers against the same criteria. Keep in mind that legacy suppliers don't necessarily need to be cut loose. If you already have a great working relationship and see their products or services as a great value adder, then there may be no reason to change or eliminate them. Another good way of approaching this is to ask them to be more flexible on small things. So maybe it's packaging or a different way of communicating outside of their standard processes and procedures. Asking the question never hurts to see how else the full value potential can be utilized from that supplier for your supply chain. As a salesperson, every company I've ever worked for, I've had at least one customer say to me during a conversation, "Oh, I didn't know your company offered those products or services." Now, this doesn't mean my company or myself did a poor job of marketing or sharing the information. It just can mean that the message was never received or got lost in the shuffle. Likewise, maybe the person in the procurement or engineering role made an assumption that we couldn't do something. We are at a point in time when information overload can be a problem, so it's extremely important to have a better communication system between companies to express full needs, on the other end, express the range of capabilities that can fulfill those needs. Likewise, new suppliers won't necessarily help improve your business. Be hypercritical when creating your evaluation criteria with the goal of benefiting the business. Then be honest in the evaluation process. The data should lead you to your conclusion to add new suppliers, remove legacy suppliers, reduce your total supply base, or incrementally add to it. Regardless of how you balance these strategies, remember the final objective is to improve your company's ability to compete. And Mark, I'd like to launch our last poll question, please.
All right, Joe, it looks to me like everybody has voted. So I'm going to close the poll and we'll share the results.
Looks like everybody agrees that this is definitely a relevant topic, and most companies or all companies could certainly benefit from some kind of supply chain efficiency, whether you're just beginning the process or you're well into the process. It's always a good topic to visit to help increase efficiencies across your supply chain. So we've been in business for over 20 years in the rapid injection molding space, and we've done over 100,000 different molding projects with companies in 50 different industries. So certainly we help companies innovate and get their product to market quicker. We're one of the fastest rapid injection molding companies in the country, and we proactively support our customers and can react quickly if your market dictates a fast adjustment. So the ideal projects for us are ones with a few iterations in the early prototype stage, and we help bridge that gap into production for low volume production. Aside from injection molding, we offer 3D printing and CNC machining services as well. So really, we can help customers kind of take their product from cradle to grave. And as I mentioned in previous slides, how important it is to get your product out to market quicker to compete. This is certainly something that we can help with in those situations. This slide does a good job kind of breaking down some of the injection molding capabilities we have as far as lead time. So typical suppliers for production in traditional molding will, range from 10 to 14 weeks for a mold, and that's to actually cut the tool and get first article parts. We're gonna greatly reduce that supply chain up front and that lead time. Our standard lead time is 13 days, and with options of expediting. We can actually get down to 10 or 5 days in certain situations on certain tools. So some of the unique things about Xcentric is our ability to do some more complex geometry in the molding space than others in rapid prototyping and low volume production. We also do overmolding and two-shot molding. We can do insert molding, and we have many standard surface finish options. That does include some custom surface finish options as well for both cosmetic and non-cosmetic types of parts. We can do laser texturing and laser etching for product markings, lot codes, things of that nature. As far as materials go, we have at least 50 stock resins for same-day production, but we can get our hands on about 99.9% of material that comes across our desk, as we have a great supply chain for resin. So that includes over 100 resins for next-day production. Any commercially available thermoplastic can be ordered or custom blended, and we do accept customer supplied materials, and we do a variety of custom blended materials. We just need a Pantone color number. So just here's a good overview of the three main services I just described that Xcentric offers. So prototype injection molding, low to mid volume production. Often we're referred to as bridge tooling. So like I said, companies will use us for 3D printing, and then as their demand grows, we can go into machining or molding depending on the demand, and we'd actually be a bridge tool until they have over 100,000 pieces for larger projects as far as demand goes. So we can do simple jigs and fixtures all the way up to very complex projects with many undercuts. We like to say we have unlimited undercuts, and we mold to meet your project requirements. For CNC machining, we have capabilities in 3-axis, 4-axis, 5-axis CNC, as well as lathes for turning. We can do precision machining down to the thousandths of an inch, and we are capable of doing small and large volume runs in a variety of materials. Some of the common materials are low carbon steel, stainless steel, plastics, and we do get into some specialty materials as well. For additive manufacturing, we can do obviously the advantage of doing 3D printing is getting into some very complex geometries. For example, aerospace specifically gets into some unique geometries that you just can't do with 5-axis machining. So 3D printing is a great way to do proof of concepts, get parts in hands quickly before moving to molding or production parts. So some of the key takeaways I hope you guys took away from my presentation today is consider how consolidation or diversification of your supply chain could benefit your daily workload and achieve company goals. Use a strategic approach to organizing your supply chain efforts, potentially using both strategies to maximize the benefits and make it a smooth transition. Xcentric is a premier provider of rapid manufacturing and low volume production services, offering injection molding, CNC machining, and 3D printing. And we're helping our customers all the way from the design stage to production. And our goal is to help you get your product to market quicker, to beat out your competitors and capture more market share. And now I'd like to open up for any questions.
All right, well, thanks, Joe. And again, to remind everyone, you can use the questions section of your screen to ask questions, and we will address those. Joe, we have a couple initial questions that have come in while you were talking. The first one, how do I evaluate using a supplier who can offer multiple services with a supplier who is a specialist?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. So that really varies from case to case. You need to make sure that someone who offers multiple services actually delivers on all those services with high proficiency. But ultimately, you need to determine if you need a specialist or not based on the project.
Okay. Next question, what's the best way to determine if a supplier can help me innovate? That's a great question.
Evaluating their design resources, willingness to share those resources, as I mentioned, with white papers, design reviews, things of that nature, and their ability and willingness to evaluate design early in process and provide suggestions to improve its ability to be manufactured. So certainly design for manufacturability is huge. You're saving your customer time, or you're saving time by partnering with those suppliers that can really steer you in the right direction. So now you're not spending as much time on design and reiterations on processes that you might not be an expert in, such as injection molding.
Okay, Joe, the next question is a follow-up to that one. How does Xcentric help me with my designs?
Sure, this is a great question, and we get this all the time with new customers that we work with. So Xcentric's going to be able to add that value add with our design for manufacturability feedback. We have a team of engineers and application engineers that have years of molding experience, along with our mold designers. So we're able to really take a partnership approach, have a screen share, help you out with suggestions of thicknesses, different materials, of how to have the best molded product possible. This will make your design smoother, often can take out some cost in certain aspects of features that you might be nice to have, but you don't need to have. At least we can present you with all the options that way.
All right, and it looks to be our last question. Again, if anyone has questions, please enter them into the questions section of your screen. The last question I see right now, Joe, is I'm in engineering. How would I influence a supply chain evaluation or get a new supplier evaluated?
So that's going to be very dependent on each company's processes, but generally speaking, if an engineer sees value in a new supplier because of capabilities, communication, reliability, speed, or other reasons, they can usually present a good case to upper management or procurement for evaluation and consideration. But again, that's going to depend on the company. So I know specifically I work with a lot of design engineers on a daily basis, and also procurement folks and managers for that example. But one of the things I like to say is, what is important in your role? Do you need a quote back quick? Do you need a lot of DFM feedback? It's really what is going to help your job be easier. And specifically for Xcentric, I think we do a great job of both of those, of helping you get the information you need quickly so you can make a informed decision internally, or if you have a tight deadline to reach for your customer, certainly it's going to depend, but I would say having all the information and seeing the positive sides is a good way to kind of internally pitch the value of a supplier like that.
Well, thanks, Joe. I don't see any other questions, so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We will send a link to the recording within a few business days. And if you have any questions about today's topics, please email us at info@xcentricmold.com. And also, as I mentioned earlier, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn so that you are up to date with all of our blogs and all of our upcoming webinars. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.